Hey, also today we're going to be talking about worship, something that I'm very passionate about, and we're going to be talking about what is wrong with modern worship. And this is something I've noticed and I've been noticing, and I really felt stirred in my heart to talk about it and to actually break down what has gone wrong in our modern worship and how can we actually return to the heart of worship. All right. But before we go any deeper, before we ever do anything, let's first define what is worship. So, worship is a giving of ourselves, a sacrificing of ourselves, an offering of ourselves, of our life to God in honor of God. That's what worship simply truly is. It's not a type of song, it's not the slow Christian songs. No, that's not worship. Worship is a giving of ourselves in sacrifice, in dedication to God. Okay, so if that's a definition of worship, then what has gone wrong? What has actually gone wrong with our modern worship? Well, I'm going to be giving you a list of a few things that have gone wrong with our modern idea and modern definition of worship and what you and I can do about it to get back into it. All right, so one thing that's gone wrong with our modern worship culture is that worship has become about Sunday moments, worship moments, and it's become limited to songs. Well, as we defined earlier, worship is not a song. Worship is not a type of song, and worship is not the moments that you have in worship when music is involved. There's so much more to that. Worship is a lifestyle that you live out. It's a life that you live out in surrender to God. And if it's just limited to the songs, and if it's just limited to just the moments, then even your moments become empty. Your moments become vain. Yes, you feel the presence of God, you feel the power of God, but there's no actual worship going on because there's no surrendering, there's no yielding of yourself, there's no giving of yourself to God happening. So we need to return to the idea of worship being not a song, but an actual lifestyle lived out. And if we even go back way earlier and we go back to where worship is first mentioned in the Bible, it's got nothing to do with a song. It's Abraham going to sacrifice Isaac. And that was his sacrifice. He was doing something that cost him. And that brings me on to the next point. Worship must cost us something. Well, when we look at our modern worship, has started to lack the costing us. It started to lack the cost. It's no longer costly. It's now about the lights and the show and how good it sounds and the chord progressions and the this and the that. Well, it was never supposed to be about any of that. It was always supposed to be about something of value that we offer to God, something of value that we are making that declaration to God. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things I just mentioned. They can help people go deeper into the presence of God. They actually help. They actually do. But when we lose the essence of things, which is that worship is not about all of that is just add-ons, and it's to help us, and it's to, it's to do things with excellence, but it's not the very essence. The essence goes back to the heart of things, which is something that costs us that we offer to God. Now that brings me on to my next point, which is that worship has become about how it makes us feel as opposed to what we're communicating to God, the message that we're saying to God, that God, I'm giving myself to you. It's become about, do I feel the presence of God? Now, of course, we've all had the moments when we've been in the presence of God and there was music going on and there was all of that. There was music playing and all of that, and the atmosphere was there, and the very heavens felt so close, and we felt the presence of God, and we felt the glory and grandeur of God. But those are not the definition of our Christianity. They're not the definition of what worship is. Yes, it's the presence of God. It's God. His nature is powerful. He's holy. And so there's no taking away that from him. So whenever he shows up in the room, there's always going to be that. But what about the moments when you don't feel it? And this leads me to my next point, which is that worship is not about performing before God. It's not about the singing. It's not about the dancing. As much as he loves that, what he's after is a heart that's worshiping, a life of worship. He's after that. When you look at the sacrifice of Cain and Abel, you look at Cain, he offered just a bunch of fruits that he gathered up, that he got from his what is it? Reaping that he reaped, whatever the word is. So he just got a bunch of those. Whereas when you look at Abel's sacrifice, it was from the firstborn, it was the choice, the like of choice. It was the fattest portions and all of that. So that brings me back to worship must cost us something. God is not looking for your performance. And God doesn't need you to lift him high because he's already high enough, like eternally high. There's no lifting him high. But what God is after is for you to actually get to know him, to get to know his nature, and to yield to him because he's a God who loves you and who really, really cares about you. And it is in this that we could say, that worship is also about acknowledging the very holy nature of God. It's about acknowledging the nature of God and not just coming and saying that we're gonna just come and we're gonna dance before God, we're gonna sing before God. Because when we just do that, our singing becomes meaningless chatter, it becomes blabber, and our dancing becomes, empty movements. And we don't want to do that. And we don't want our worship to become just jumping up and down. And that plays a great role into worship. It plays a great role into worship. It helps us to freely express ourselves, to more deeply express our worship. So something else is that worship, we have begun thinking that we need to feel something in order to start worshiping. Well, that is not the case, my friend, because we don't need to feel anything in order to worship God. We can worship just as we are and give God and acknowledge the grandeur and greatness of God and just bring ourselves before him as we are. So that keeps on bringing me back to the central point, which is that worship is not really about the external things we do. God is not after that. He's after our hearts. He's not after our music. He's after our hearts. And music plays a very great role in worship. But he's not after all of that. He's after our heart. It is when we surrender our hearts, when we yield our hearts, when we give our whole lives to actually worship God. When we love our family, love our friends, love our neighbors, love our enemies. When we choose to live our lives in a way that's worthy of him. That, my friend, is true worship. All right. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you really liked it, consider subscribing and also check out this video, which is appearing right here, about how to reject rejection. All right, so that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.